Hi, I'm Stu from HiveMind Automation, and welcome to the Hive. In the last several videos in this series, we've set up Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi, explored the user interface, talked about choosing accessories, and explored automations. In this video, we're going to look at customizing our Home Assistant install with the use of community add-ons and custom components. One of the best things about Home Assistant is how customizable it is. If you've installed Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi like I did in the earlier videos, you should have access to the add-on store in the Supervisor tab. And let's take a look at that now. First, we need to navigate to the IP address and port 8123 of our Home Assistant installation, and we're going to go to the Supervisor. Now, you'll remember in the second video, we spoke about updates appearing here, and we'll see that we've got some updates already available. So let's run those now, and these are going to take a little while. So we'll pause the video and we'll come back once these updates have finished running. Okay, so we've now installed the Supervisor update and the OS update. We're now going to install the Home Assistant Core 115.1 update. Much like the OS update, this is most likely going to require a restart of Home Assistant, so it may take a couple of minutes to come back up to a usable state. So we'll click update and we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, and we're back. So we've installed the Home Assistant 115 update. It's a big update. There was a huge push to do some bug fixes. So it's always worth taking a look at the release notes for any update. This one has quite a lot of stuff in there. It's always worth checking out the new integrations and new platforms in each release as well. And also integrations now able to set up from the UI. And it's also worth taking a look at the breaking changes. So let's take a quick look at the new integrations for 115. So these are the new integrations available for version 115, the new platforms that have support through 115, integrations that can now be set up from the UI. So Broadlink, that's interesting. So the Broadlink RM Mini 3 that I showed in episode 3 can now be set up from the Home Assistant UI. That's exciting. If you need help, and some breaking changes. So there's quite a few breaking changes in this release, so it's always worth going through and checking if breaking changes are going to affect you when you are updating Home Assistant. Let's pop back over to Home Assistant and get back to the matter at hand, and that is add-ons and customizations for Home Assistant. In episode 2, we explored the user interface and we had a look at the add-on store, and we added a couple. We added the file editor and the Samba share. I'm going to take a quick look at the Samba share very quickly, and I'm going to go start on boot and turn on Watchdog, and let's turn on auto update as well. And looks like there's already an update available as well, and I'm going to hit start on that. And we're going to go to missing required option, go to configuration. And so what it requires from me is a password. So I'm just going to give it a simple password. Obviously you would want to make this something a little bit more complicated. And it's got the username of Home Assistant. I'm going to save that configuration, go back to the info page up here, and we'll hit start. Won't worry about updating that just yet. We'll do that later. So now that I've enabled Samba, that allows us to mount the drive or mount Home Assistant as a network drive. 1.146. So I'm going to go connect and connect and Home Assistant and our password, and we'll hit connect on there. For now, I'll just move that out of the way. For now, let's connect to everything. So we've got these 5 shares available to us. We've got backup, config, SSL, and we've also got add-ons and share. We'll actually be using these a little bit later on when we look at a different add-on for Home Assistant. Config is probably the main one that is worth keeping an eye on, because this is where we can actually look and see our different configuration files. So if we wanted to, we could use a text editor on our own computer mounted through the SMB share to edit these files. Let's pop back over to Home Assistant and grab the supervisor, and now that that is running, we should see, yep, so that Samba share is now colored. I've taken the liberty of also installing Visual Studio Code. We saw the file editor previously in another video. I've installed Visual Studio Code on this instance as well, because I find it's just a much cleaner interface and it's a little bit easier to work with than the file editor. And the syntax highlighting is a lot nicer as well. So if we wanted to, we could take a look at the Home Assistant log. We could take a look at the configuration.yaml file or the automations.yaml file, and we could modify those, save the changes, and they're already saved in Home Assistant, and we've done that from the browser, which is great. Back to the supervisor, and we'll take a look again at the add-on store. Now in episode 2, we took a look at the add-on store and we installed some stuff, and I'm going to make a couple of additional recommendations here about things that you should install, but pretty much everything here should be things that are in some way useful to you, and you don't have to install everything. You only want to install the stuff that's useful to you. So for example, if you wanted to have dynamic DNS with Let's Encrypt support, you could install DuckDNS, and that's a great thing for having an easy to remember DNS name to access your Home Assistant service. I would also recommend installing Terminal and SSH, and so we will install that. And again, there's some configuration that we need to do on this once it's installed and started. So let's give it a moment to install. So that's installed. I'm going to install Watchdog. I'm going to turn on auto update, and I'm going to also click show in sidebar, and you'll see we've got a terminal there. I'll also go to the configuration, and again I'm going to put in a password, just a very simple one here. So something I forgot on the configuration tab here is we also need to add a host port onto this configuration. So if we hit save, and we'll go restart add-on, and this will actually allow us to SSH into the Home Assistant instance. So now that that's done, we'll pop back over here, we'll go SSH root 192.168.1.146, and that's better. So it's asking us to verify the authenticity. I'm going to type yes, and it's going to ask us for our password, and now we're into Home Assistant. So if I go, and so we can type in HA help, and it shows us a list of command line items that we can run on Home Assistant. So if I were to go HA core logs, that's going to show me the logs on Home Assistant core. We'll just exit out of that. So that is SSH and terminal, and we also added terminal to the sidebar here. So you've also got the same thing through the web browser. Sometimes the web server can crash, and so enabling SSH can be helpful to be able to go and type in, say, either HA core restart, which would restart the Home Assistant core, or even HA host reboot, which would reboot the Raspberry Pi. Back over to the supervisor again and the add-on store. So terminal, SSH, Samba share, those are definitely things that I would recommend. Mosquito Broker is something else that's very useful, and we'll install that because we're going to take a look at Mosquito a little bit later on for some MQTT messaging. MQTT is a lightweight messaging protocol that's used very frequently in a home automation context, and it's actually used in the DIY LED strips that I showed you in episode 3. So we'll turn on Watchdog and auto update. We'll take a look at the configuration. We don't really need to worry too much about this just yet. We'll actually take a closer look later on. But if we wanted to, we could modify those. And again, there's documentation available, and we'll start that up. And that's the MQTT broker running. And so that's just from the official add-ons. There's a Home Assistant community add-ons available here as well, and there's some great community add-ons available. Visual Studio Code is one of those. Now, if you wanted to, we could add additional repositories for Home Assistant things in here. So for example, we've got this ESP Home repository. If I copy the location of this, ESP Home is useful on ESP8266 boards, especially for DIY purposes, to connect things into Home Assistant. And if I click on the 3-dot stack over here and click on repositories, I can put in the address there and click add, and now we can close, and we'll see we've got the ESP Home Assistant add-ons available there. So that's add-ons. Now there's one other add-on I would recommend, which allows you to also install some additional custom components quite easily. And that's called the Home Assistant Community Store, or HACS. It's a powerful UI to handle downloads of all your custom needs. So there's a fairly decent demonstration down here, and there's an installation guide. Now it's got, as soon as you click on the installation guide, it tells you the prerequisites. So you need at least Home Assistant version 1.10 or newer. We've just updated to 1.15.1. We need a GitHub account. If you don't know what that is, then stop right now. Let's not go further. You do need a supported Home Assistant installation, access to the file system where Home Assistant is located. Now you'll remember that just a moment ago, we mounted that file system using the Samba shares. And we need to know how to access the Home Assistant log file and a stable internet connection with sufficient data available or no data caps. If we click next, it takes us to how to do the installation. So the first is to download the newest release from the release page. So I'm going to open that in a new tab and grab HACS.zip. Okay, so now we've downloaded the zip file, we need to extract that. So we'll go over to our downloads folder, and on Mac OS, we'll just double click that. On Windows, you may need to right click and extract all. So that's created this HACS folder, and we've got some details in here. Now what we need to do is create a custom components folder. So we want to open the folder where you have your configuration.yaml file. And if we don't see a custom components folder in there, we want to create it. So let's take a look over here. We've got our configuration.yaml file, and we don't have a custom components folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that so that our syntax is correct, and I'm going to create a new folder and custom components. Okay. The folder named HACS needs to be copied into your Home Assistant installation. Specifically, it needs to be placed under the config directory into custom components. And then we can use our favorite tool to move the files there. So in this instance, on my Mac, I'm just grabbing this whole HACS folder and I'm dropping it on there. And because we're using the Samba file share, it's just going to copy that across the network for me nicely. You can do that any number of ways that work for you. Then we need to restart Home Assistant once before we move on to the next step. So let's pop back over to our Home Assistant, and we'll go to the supervisor, and I'm going to go to the system. And in this case, I'm going to reboot the whole host. So that's going to take a couple of moments. Once that's finished being done, the next part is to add it to our configuration. So let's click on the link and see what that entails. So while we're waiting for the machine to reboot, before we start with the configuration, we need to go to GitHub to get a personal access token. So let's go to GitHub. I happen to have that right here. Now, if you haven't already got a GitHub account, you can sign up using this link here. I already happen to have one, so I'm just going to sign in now. Okay, so now we need to get a personal access token, and if we open these instructions here, we'll find out how to do that. So we want to go to the GitHub and go to developer settings. So if we go to github.com/settings/tokens, so let's just do that there, and we'll go generate new token, and we can give it a logical name so that we can recognize it. Let's call this one HACS Hive, and we can just go generate token. Okay, and then it says make sure you copy your new personal access token. You won't be able to see it again, so we're going to click this button right next to here, or we can highlight it and copy. So we'll copy our personal access token and go back to Home Assistant, and that's finished rebooting. And we're going to go to configuration and integrations, and we're going to click the plus symbol here. Now that we've clicked the plus symbol, we're going to either scroll through or start typing. Let's start typing, and we'll type in HACS. So there we've got HACS, and it's installing the integration. Okay, so that's finished installing. So we're going to paste our GitHub personal access token here and hit submit. So it's created the configuration. If we wanted to, we can give that an area. Let's not worry about it, and we'll hit finish. Okay, so now that HACS is installed, we've got this HACS thing over here. I'm just going to hit the options on here, and I'm going to tick some boxes in here. So I'm going to, firstly, I'm going to enable app daemon, net daemon, and let's enable experimental features as well, and we'll submit that. Then I've just restarted the Home Assistant host, and now we've hit the HACS sidebar menu, and we'll see we've got HACS is starting up and background tasks pending. Now hopefully everything should be working, but let's take a look at integrations, and we'll see that we've got HACS is here, and if we wanted to, we could take a look at the repository for HACS. If we head back here, we've also got this stack of dots, so we can look at information, reinstall or open an issue. Now let's click on the plus button, and we see that we've now got some different repositories that we can add using HACS. Things like a garbage collection, which adds a sensor for scheduling garbage collection, and all sorts of other stuff in here. And these are all community provided custom components, and so your mileage may vary with some of these. You know, you've got a YouTube sensor, which gives you information about the newest video on a YouTube channel, maybe HiveMind automation. Don't forget to like and subscribe there. So if you wanted to, you could start searching through here. For example, there's Unify Protect integration for Home Assistant. We could click on that, and it's going to load some information about us. So if I wanted to install that, we can go install this repository in HACS, and we can either show beta versions or not, hit install, and that's going to take a couple of minutes and install that. Great. So that's going to append a restart. We do need to restart Home Assistant for any of these new integrations to work. So that's on the integrations tab. We've also got the front end tab. The front end allows us to install different themes and different Lovelace cards. So for example, we could choose iOS dark mode theme, and we could install that if we wanted to. We'll install that repository in HACS. Great. And maybe also RGB light card, a Lovelace custom card for RGB lights. So we'll click that, we'll take a look, and it just gives us some simple controls over some of those RGB lights if we wanted to. And it's got some information on how we can ensure that we configure that. So we do need to add resources to our Lovelace configuration, and that happens at the top, and we'll do a deep dive on Lovelace in another video. So let's install that repository. And so the last thing in here is automation. So we can click plus, and then there's some stuff in there. We could do, say, an Alexa and Friends doorbell. So let's do that. And this again, details on how to configure it, and details of the repository itself. So we'll install that repository and click install again, and we've installed that. So that's add-ons for Home Assistant. I hope this has helped you to understand the customization options available to you with Home Assistant, and to help you to find some inspiration of some of the things that you can do inside Home Assistant that may not necessarily be supported out of the box. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video with your friends and family who are interested in home automation. I'm Stu from HiveMind Automation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.